Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Kramer versus Kramer. For a lot of people, especially with the way I go about doing reviews, a lot of movies might just seem random and or odd to because I've kind of built up like a certain kind of genre that has been put into the channel, whether it be superhero stuff or whether it be horror like things. And like probably a lot of people would find this review to just be like an odd placement within all of this stuff. Really, going into Kramer versus Kramer, I have never seen this whole entire movie before. I've seen little tiny clips here and there, especially the whole ice cream scene. I've seen that. But really, like, I have never fully fledgedly sat down, watched this film, and I had finally done that now. So this is another one of those like really truly just like first time things where now I'm finally realizing what this movie was about. So a lot of people could connect with this film because this movie is actually about a divorce between a couple. We have a wife that is to walk out one day on Ted's best day of his life, or one of his best days of his life, and we are to now have Ted Kramer, who is to try and figure out what is he going to do now. Now with just him and his kid, like what is he going to do? Because really, there was quite a bit of times where I think Ted did rely on Joanna for a lot of things, and he is just realizing that now. That is like, oh crap, well now I have to go and do like the common day-to-day stuff that with my job I probably wouldn't have had time to do, but I have to make time. I have to figure out uh, how to make this possible because I love my son and like I want to make this work. We eventually have Ted, who is to try to get over this heartbreak, get over this divorce, and try to like just kind of talk to women that are always just going to be his friends, or we eventually have at some point Ted who decides to go out with another woman to try and like just be able to just have a woman around the house kind of thing. We have some things going on with Ted's son Billy in this movie to really just try to say that there is going to be some mistakes here and there that are going to happen while Ted is with his son. That's bound to happen. But we are to eventually see Ted's reaction after these things are to happen, proving how much he loves his son, proving how much that that his son like really and truly does matter to him, and that like he is a good father, and that Joanna eventually realizing that eventually after time she does miss her son makes Ted very upset about this, because it's like, well, like I have been taking care of my son for almost seemingly a year now, and you just come in and just say, well, I want him back after I have kind of built up this kind of pattern of being able to just kind of working around how I can make it so that my work and my personal life don't conflict, and also like making my son a priority and trying to figure out how I'm going to keep a job alive and also my son. this movie was really just one of those kind of like, it was a slow film, but I didn't mind. Like, it was one of those films where I thought, you know what, like sometimes you just need a movie that just feels slow and simple, and but it's okay. Like this movie just kind of feels like that. This movie just kind of like says that to me, that it's like, well, it's slow and it's but like you invest in the characters, and so uh, that's what sticks you into, just like, you know what, like at first I was kind of like, man, this movie's slow, but man, this movie is just like, you can actually invest in all the characters. So like that's what hooked me into the movie, and I was like, I want to see this movie to the end. Like, it's not one of those that eventually at some point you just want to click off. It's like, no, I just want to see what happens. Like, I'm invested now. Like, there's some interesting things going on here. And so, with that said, I think those interesting things now need to be said. I think it's about that time territory to go into that coveted double 5 times spot, to otherwise say it is about that time. It is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, we have Ted, who we find out is a advertising future executive. That eventually we have Ted, who is so close he can taste it, to a brand new job that is seemingly much more like a lot to deal with it than I guess he had ever had in previous. Like, he's up for a promotion, and this promotion has a lot of strings attached to it, where Ted has to be available like 24/7. That like really Ted needs to like stay at work all hours to hear some kind of crappy or story from his boss, or Ted needs to bring up some stupid story to make his boss laugh. Yeah, kind of just very fake and very just. But we realize that Ted is trying to butter up his boss, but on top of that, like, Ted is not actually realizing what he is uh, what he is not giving up when he is to not go back home. Like, and so we have Jonah, who is realizing how much time that she is spending with her kid and not really her husband. I'm sure probably Jonah and Ted's relationship probably is one of those where like Jonah probably never sees Ted. It's probably one of those situations, by the time that Jonah is asleep, Ted comes home, and like they're just two ships passing in the night. Hence why when Ted is to finally get this promotion, Ted is like, oh my god, I gotta run home to tell my wife. That is the one thing that I need to do, is run home to tell my wife about the greatest day that I've had out of the number of other days that I've had. So we have Ted rushing home to tell his wife, hey, honey, like, I made it. Like, I made it to the ship. Like, I made it to this advertising executive position. Honey, we've done it. And we have Jonah, who's like, yeah, that's great and all, but I'm leaving you. Like, we have Jonah that is consistently trying to interrupt Ted to tell him that she's leaving. And Ted is like, what? What? Why? And Jonah is just like, I'm done. Like, I'm leaving. Like, I'm bags are packed. I'm out of here. And so, like, at first we have Ted, who's kind of like aspiring to go like, well, did one of your friends talk you into doing this? Like, was one of your friends like kind of like it must have been this girl who was like probably had just left her wife or left her husband. Like, did you talk to her? And like Jonah's like, no, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that, but Ted still kind of feels that way. And so we have Jonah that just walks out on her husband and her son. Not saying that Jonah didn't have a good reason to, or just felt that she, like, the way that she comes back into this movie actually is really amazing. I love the fact of how she comes back into this film and, like, the reasoning for why she comes back into this film. That is great. I love that. So we have Ted, who is now like having to really just push down every single feeling of what had just happened. Because Ted is realizing, well, like, dude, I gotta work tomorrow. I gotta get my kid ready for school. Like, I have to basically push every single emotion down. Like, yeah, I'll talk to some of my like one of my friends about it, but I need to just like shut all this off until we eventually have finally Ted at some point in this movie talking to his son, and all those motions finally come to the surface, and we had Ted realize like the mistakes that he has made. And eventually that's a very intriguing piece that we'll talk about later. So we have we have Ted who is trying to desperately figure out how to make his son breakfast. So like he just makes this bizarrish like French toast. And eventually to the point that that just kind of becomes like their new normal. And so we have kind of Ted kind of mentioning how to like to make this French toast with Billy, and so like they're trying to like make some resemblance of a breakfast, and so we have Ted trying to take his son out to school, and so then he makes it out to his job, and so we just more and more have Ted's boss, who is Jim O'Connor, who is telling Ted, you know what, like, after you getting a divorce from your wife, like, I am starting to get very worried. Like, I'm starting to get, like, very concerned about what, like, you can manage with this job because it's 24/7. Like, you really need to be on your toes and be at my ever beck and whim, and I don't know if you can do that. And so we eventually have Ted, who is at one day becoming is very late because he had to go quickly grocery shopping, to the point of him bringing every single one of his things of groceries in with him to work. And so we have Ted, who is 15 minutes late, and Ted is like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I'm late." We have Ted who gives his groceries to his assistant and like tells her to put the chicken in the refrigerator, and so we have again Jim, who's like, "I am getting very very worried," and so we consistently go on with this, and so we eventually have Ted, who is consistently going to uh, this this playground, and he is consistently talking with a girl named Margaret Phillips, and Ted is to kind of express to Margaret about his divorce, and that probably one of Jonah's friends kind of talked her into it. And Margaret is to also have gone through a divorce as well. And like she is kind of heartbroken that her husband had left her, and Ted is trying to comfort Margaret, like being reminded about this divorce. But it seems like they are really just really good friends, And even to the point to where Ted eventually tells Margaret, it's like, well, hey, if something is ever to happen to me, I want you to be my, I want you to be the person I turn to um, have my son be his parent because I trust you more than anyone else. And so Margaret just starts like bawling her eyes out with this information, and Ted is trying to comfort her. But they're good friends. That's all they're going to be. It's just good friends. So, because here is what happens. So we have Ted and Margaret consistently going to this playground, and at one time we have Billy who is to go and play with the plane on top of this like jungle gym-ish like thing, and he is to fall off this jungle gym and have a plane kind of like hit right next to his face. And so all of a sudden we have Billy's face that is now starting to bleed. And so we have Ted who is grabbing Billy and running like it's the Boston Marathon or something, like blazing speed to get to the hospital, desperately screaming and asking anybody, like, where's the emergency room? And they point out to him, and he runs to get his son into medical care. So we have the doctor telling Ted that his son is going to need stitches, but the scar like won't be easily seen by anyone. And Ted is like, "Oh my god, like this is awful." So we have Ted that will not leave Billy's side. Ted is like, "I want to be there for whatever happens," to the point of Ted is holding Billy's head while this doctor is to give him stitches right next to his eye. And so Billy is screaming and yelling, "Stop, like, please." And Ted is trying to tell Billy, like, we're almost done. Like, come on, buddy. Like we're almost there. Like, if anything, we'll get ice cream after this or something. Like, I'm sorry for this all happening, but so we we have Margaret eventually like mentioning to Ted how sorry she was that Billy had slipped and fell, and Ted is like, you know what, like you're gonna be like you're gonna be Billy's godmother if something were ever to happen to me. So like, just like, if anything, I trust you more than anyone else, so everything's fine. Like, it's not your fault, it's no one's fault, it is what it is. So we push on, and so we have Ted that is trying to be in Billy's life as much as he can, even to the point of Ted going to Billy's like plays or recitals, whatever he's in for his class. We have Billy kind of stumbling over his lines, like the teacher is trying to help him. Ted is actually in the audience yelling out some of Billy's lines for him to say, and Ted gets it correct for Billy to help him out. And like, it's just the sweetest moment where like we have a bunch of other family members like laughing, but it's like Ted is just like, no, I want to help out my son, like all you people. And so I know I shouldn't be like going and approaching this the way I'm approaching this. This for a lot of people could be like a family film or whatever, but it is what it is. So we have Ted eventually going to his boss, uh, the big old worrywart that Jim O'Connor is. And so we have Jim O'Connor who is going to Ted and going, yeah, you know what? Like, I've been so worried about you that I've kind of started to give other people your accounts, and I've started to give you less work. And Ted is like, well, no, don't do that. Like, if anything, like, I think I'm the best of your, like, guys. Like, I can song and dance people and win them over. And Jim is like, well, yeah, that's great and all, but I think I'm going to actually have to let you go. Like, your job is not your priority, and that is clear, so you need to be let go. And this is the worst possible time for Ted to be fired from a job. Because what is to happen is Jonah is to come back. Come back, mentioning that she misses her son. She is to watch over him every day at some spot to see um, Billy playing in the playground because she can see him from there. She's in some coffee spot that's kind of adjacent from where Billy is playing. And so we have Jonah that is interested in coming back. She left because she wanted to find herself, because it kind of seemed that she was trying to be a wife and a mother, and but she didn't know what she was who she actually was or wanted to be. And so eventually she went out to try to find herself, and I guess she did find herself, and now she wants to find herself with her son at her side. It seems that also Jonah is also seeing a therapist to kind of work through some things, and we have kind of Ted concerned about that because he's like, well, like, how mentally stable is she if she's seeing a therapist? I don't know. I don't know if I want my son reconnecting with his mother if she's seeing therapy right now. Because Ted, like, never had time to go and seek out therapy with all the stuff he had to compile together. Um, Plus, also, at some point within this movie, before we get to that all happening, we also had Ted who had gone out with one of his coworkers, Phyllis Bernard. He went out and had a date with her, and eventually slept with her. Eventually, Phyllis is to, funny enough, like, she is to go out um, of Ted's room and eventually go to the bathroom without any clothes on, and Billy is to be home and walk into seeing Phyllis, and so Phyllis is to, like, just try to like cover up, and Billy and Phyllis are having this conversation, and then they just walk off together. And Phyllis goes back into Ted's room, like, well, I guess I met your son. And Ted is like, yeah, I guess you did meet my son. I didn't even realize that. So we also have, of course, the ice cream moment. We have to mention the ice cream moment. Because we have Billy that, like, what an amazing actor that this kid is. Like, I really was like, man, this kid is, like, really good at what he does. Like, we have this kid that is consistently mentioning that stuff was great with his father before, but now he just hates it. There's a lot of times where he is to, like things of his father's meals before, but now he just hates it bizarrely. And so we also have Billy kind of mentioning a lot about his mother and how he wants to kind of go back with his mother. And Ted is like, well, if you have that, like, kind of thought in your mind, then by all means. It's like, because, like, he's trying his best to, like, cut this kid's food and, like, and all kinds of things. He's trying to be, like, a part of his life, but if the kid has feelings, and the kid has feelings. But eventually, Billy is pushing it. Eventually not wanting to eat his dinner, but he is to go and grab a chair and go and get the ice cream from the refrigerator. And we have Ted who's like, do not do that. Like, if you're going to do that, if you're going to eat that ice cream, you're going to be in big trouble. And so we have Kramer, we have Billy who takes off the lid, puts a big scoop of ice cream into this spoon, and Ted keeps ramping it up even more to be like, if you do that, you're going to be really, 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 really big trouble. And so we have Ted who puts the ice cream to his mouth. And so we have Ted who grabs Billy, puts him in his room, and just tells him like he's on a timeout or whatever. So we have like as if this kid like I think he like never eats in this movie. Like I don't know. Like is this kid starving? I don't know because it seems like he never eats in this film. So we have Ted who goes back to his son for his son to mention that the reason why he thought his mother left was because of him. And Ted is like, no, like, that is wrong. Like, if anything, the reason why your mother left was because of me. Because really, I think I had tried to make your mother a certain kind of woman, and that is something that she did not want to be. And she had to be that for so long that eventually it just drove her to want out of here. And really, that's all on me. That I didn't take, I didn't take much more, uh, time to care about Jonah's needs and what she wants, and so on and so forth. And we start to see that Ted here, is starting to really have all these feelings kind of really truly bubble up to the surface and get really emotional here. And so we eventually have Billy and Ted kind of call it a night, and so they tell one another that they love one another, and so we move on. So we eventually have Jonah who wants to come back into Billy's life, and so now Ted is going to a divorce lawyer to battle for custody for his child. And so we have this attorney who is now knowing that Ted had lost his job. And so we have this attorney, this lawyer, who's telling Ted, well, if anything, it's going to look horrifically bad if you do not have a job going into this proceedings. Like, you're not going to get your child if you don't have a job. And so we have Ted who is scrambling to now have to get a job within 24 hours. And so we have Ted scrambling to find any single job that he could possibly find. And eventually he goes into one job just telling them, hey, I want this job and you guys are going to give me this job. Whoever you have to talk to give me this job, I will sing and dance and whatever you need to for me to get this job. And so we have it to where these guys give all kinds of excuses that well, this person is out today, it's a holiday, it's a whatever. And so we have Ted who's no, I want to make sure I have this job. And this guy is the guy who's offering Ted his job is well, you're kind of pushy, aren't you? And he's yes, I am. So we eventually have Ted who is to give his resume to the people that is to hire him. And so we have the guy mentioning to Ted, it's well, it seems like you're overqualified for this job. And Ted is yes, I am, but that doesn't matter because I'm willing to do this job. And so they're well, I guess since this guy just wants this job so badly, let's give it to him. So we have Ted who is to get this job, and immediately the first thing he is to do is bring his son Billy to this job to show off his office and how it's a great view and all kinds of other things. And Billy's well, yeah, what a this looks great. We have Ted who is showing him all these buildings and everything. It's kind of interesting how really Ted is really taking his home life and his job, and he's really mixing the two, because I don't think he did anything like that before. So here is the hearing. So, or here is the custody battle. So we go on to have eventually. It seems that this attorney or this lawyer is telling Ted, it's like, man, I think they're probably going to side with the mother on this one. And so we have Ted trying to eventually try to talk his way into getting his child and keeping him. But we also have Joanna, who is also going on the stand as well. And we have Ted, who's to mention, like, what is the difference in gender of me, of who is going to be a better parent? Like, if anything, like, I have been taking care of my son for 18 months by myself, and I've done well. And plus, also, we have Ted, who mentions, it's like, also, my wife has seen a therapist. Like, I am just kind of concerned that, uh, like, where she is at mentally right now to take my son. And so, like, but we eventually have Joanna, who is eventually to throw and sling mud at Ted as well, mentioning about how uh, in Ted's care, Billy has had a scar on his face. He had fallen, and also that Ted, Jonah had repeated some things that Ted said in a previous conversation between the two of them. And we have Ted, who's looking at Joanna and going like, wow, like you're putting out all of the stops to try to get my son. Well, that's what you're gonna do, then fine. There's nothing I can do now. There's nothing I can do. So we have Jonah or Joanna, who gets full custody of her son, and we have Ted just having to be okay about this. So Joanna is to eventually try to talk to Ted, but Ted just is like, I'm not going to talk to you. Ted eventually is to get all of or most of Billy's stuff together to basically tell him, like, hey, you're going to be living with your mother. If anything, we're going to have most of your toys over there. And, like, we're going to try to make this the best transition for Billy. And so we eventually have Joanna, or Jonah? I don't know. I keep messing it up. We eventually have Jonah, who is to eventually go and is supposed to get her son, and Jonah is telling Ted that she needs to talk to him alone. So we have Ted, who goes to Jonah, and Jonah mentions, it's like, well, once I started to realize what I am doing to my son, like pulling him away from a room of his clouds, and realizing that I have to try to recreate that home with me and try to repaint those clouds and try to do like all this to just try to recreate a home that he has already had. I've realized what a mistake I'm making. That I'm trying to pull Billy away from a home that he has had for so long. And so Jonah is starting to realize that maybe Ted should keep their son. And Ted is just like, we'll work something out. Like, we'll work something out. Like, believe me. Like, and so we have both Ted and Jonah hugging, and eventually they are going to go up to the elevator. And Ted is like, do you want to explain this to our son? And Jonah's like, well, yeah, like, if anything, like she tries to like clear her eyes of all the tears, and we have Jonah who's like, how do I look? And Ted's like, terrific. And so Jonah goes up into the elevator. Ted just waits out there for Jonah to be done talking with Billy and gives her her space. And that's the way the movie ends. I'm like, yeah, like that's awesome. And so, like, eventually they are to just kind of work things out and coordinate and whatever. Like, I'm assuming or assessing it's probably going to be a lot more of like a 50-50 kind of split, and they're just going to just figure out how to coordinate things and just work things out. Like, I don't think that eventually they're going to become a couple again. Like, I just think that really, like, it's just like, okay, we're going to figure something out of how to be able to work out this schedule with having Billy. And that's just the way the movie ends. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.